My CEO wife had me sent to prison for a year. The day I walked free, I changed my name and left the country. 6 years later, fate brought us face to face again at our class reunion. Her eyes were red with tears as she looked at me and whispered, "Oh, do you still hate me?" The moment the prison gate slammed shut behind me, I thought I might look back. I didn't. The heavy clang of the iron gate echoed in my chest like thunder. I stood there in silence, my release papers crumpled tightly in my hand. I was still wearing the same gray jacket I had on the day I was arrested. In my pocket were the only 312 yuan I had left. The sunlight was almost blinding. I hadn't seen daylight this bright in an entire year, and there wasn't a single person waiting to welcome me back. After standing there for a couple of minutes, I flagged down a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The airport." During that year behind bars, I realized one thing. This city had never truly been my home. I was born here. I grew up here. I got married here. I was imprisoned here. But it wasn't the city that had betrayed me. It was the people. At the airport, I spent almost all my money on a one-way ticket to Bangkok. Whatever remained bought me a bottle of water and a loaf of bread. Before boarding, I stopped in the restroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I had lost nearly 15 kilos. My cheeks were hollow, my cheekbones sharp, and my eyes were sunken with exhaustion. I stared at my reflection and quietly said, "Lin Yu is dead." I splashed cold water on my face, turned around, and boarded the plane without looking back. Exactly 6 years later, I was sitting in the back seat of a black Maybach as it rolled through the busiest street in Hitching. The city had changed in many ways. The skyscrapers were taller. New shopping malls lined the streets. Yet somehow the humid air still smelled exactly the same. "Mr. Liu," my assistant Ken said, turning around with a tablet in his hand. "The class reunion is on the 3rd floor of Hitching International Hotel. It starts at 7:30. 47 classmates have confirmed they'll be there, including your ex-wife Qin Wantong." He hesitated before asking, "Would you like me to come with you?" "No. Just wait in the car." "But, Mr. Liu." I shot him a single look. He immediately fell silent. After working for me for years, he knew exactly what that look meant. Don't ask unnecessary questions. The car stopped at the hotel entrance. A doorman opened the door, and I stepped out, straightened my cuffs, and walked into the lobby. As soon as I passed the reception desk, the hotel manager recognized me and hurried over. "Welcome, Mr. Liu. Your presidential suite on the top floor is ready." Then I asked, "Who booked tonight's banquet hall?" He quickly checked the reservation list. "Mr. Xiao Jianghua, sir. He booked it for a class reunion." I nodded. "Put his entire bill on my account." The manager paused for a second before smiling. "Of course, Mr. Liu. I'll arrange it immediately." Inside the elevator, I adjusted my tie while staring at my reflection in the mirrored wall. The man looking back at me had nothing in common with the skinny, broken prisoner who walked out of jail 6 years ago. Now I stood nearly 90 kilos, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. Patek Philippe rested on my wrist. My features had become sharper, my posture stronger, and my face carried the calm confidence of a man who had survived hell. The elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor. The banquet hall door was slightly open. Laughter, conversations, and the clinking of glasses drifted into the hallway. I didn't walk in immediately. Instead, I stood at the doorway and quietly looked inside. There were 5 large round tables with around 40 people chatting, drinking, laughing, and scrolling through their phones. At the head table sat a woman in a black satin dress. Her hair was elegantly pinned up, and a single strand of pearls rested around her neck. Qin Wantong. She had changed over the past 6 years. Tiny lines had appeared around her eyes, and there was a trace of exhaustion hidden behind her smile. But she was still beautiful, still elegant, still the kind of woman who naturally became the center of attention wherever she went. My wife. No, my ex-wife. The same woman who had stood in court with tears streaming down her face and accused me of stealing her money. The same woman who personally carried box after box of company records, contracts, and so-called evidence to the witness stand. The same woman who looked me in the eyes after the judge announced my sentence and coldly said, "Go to hell, Lin Yu. He's dead. So am I." Taking a slow breath, I pushed the banquet hall door open and walked inside. The sound of the door instantly caught everyone's attention. A few classmates sitting near the entrance turned to look as soon as I walked in. Then the people at the next table noticed me. Within seconds, the entire banquet hall fell silent. Class monitor Xiao Jianghua was the first to react. Holding a wine glass, he walked toward me and looked me up and down. His expression shifted from confusion to complete shock. Lin Yu? The room went completely silent. Every pair of eyes was fixed on me. I smiled and extended my hand. "Long time no see, Monitor Xiao. But I changed my name. I go by Lu Chen now." Xiao Jianghua grabbed my hand, but he was too stunned to speak. His mouth opened and closed several times, yet no words came out. Whispers quickly spread through the room. "Isn't that Lin Yu? I heard he went to prison. Didn't he only serve 1 year before disappearing? How did he change so much? He doesn't look anything like the Lin Yu we used to know." Across the room, Qin Wantong slowly stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She stared at me with wide eyes filled with disbelief, panic, and another emotion I couldn't quite identify. I simply gave her a polite, distant nod, the kind you'd give a complete stranger. Then I walked to the head table and took the seat Xiao Jianghua had prepared for me. It was directly across from Qin Wantong. For the rest of the evening, I chatted casually with my old classmates, catching up on their lives and careers. We talked about work, changing industries, and all the meaningless small talk people make at reunions. Someone asked where I'd been all these years. "I've been running a small business in Southeast Asia," I replied. Another classmate smiled and asked, "So, are you married?" I simply shook my head. "No." Throughout the entire evening, I could feel Qin Wantong's eyes on me. She never looked away. She barely touched her food, but she kept drinking glass after glass of red wine until her cheeks turned an unnatural shade of red. As the reunion was coming to an end, she finally stood. She slowly walked around the table until she was standing right in front of me. Every eye in the room followed her. She stood while I remained seated. Her eyes were red with tears. Her lips trembled uncontrollably. "Oh!" Her voice was soft, yet it echoed through the silent banquet hall. "Do you still hate me?" She reached out and grabbed my sleeve. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling so badly that her nails nearly pierced the fabric, as though she was afraid I would disappear if she let go. The room was so quiet that even the hum of the air conditioner sounded loud. I looked at her tear-filled eyes, her trembling lips, and the hand gripping my sleeve. Then I slowly stood up. I was half a head taller than she was. Looking straight into her eyes, I spoke calmly, each word clear and deliberate. "You've mistaken me for someone else, ma'am. My surname is Lu." Gently but firmly, I removed her hand from my sleeve. Her hand remained suspended in the air. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, rolling down her cheeks and falling onto the white tablecloth, leaving dark, wet stains. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but only a broken sob escaped. Around us, people gasped. Some whispered to each other. Others discreetly pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Xiao Jianghua stood nearby with his wine glass still in his hand, his face frozen, unable to say a single word. I calmly picked up a napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it back on the table. Then I looked around the room. "It was great seeing everyone today," I said in a calm but steady voice. "I have something else to take care of, so I'll be leaving first. Next time, dinner is on me." No one answered. I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, a desperate, tear-choked voice suddenly echoed through the hall. "Lin Yu, stop. You are Lin Yu. Why are you pretending you don't know me?" I never slowed my pace. I reached the door, pushed it open, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, leaving her sobs trapped inside the banquet hall. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, lined with dark red carpeting and crystal wall lights. I walked forward with steady steps, my breathing calm and even. Ken stepped out from the stairwell and quietly fell in behind me. "Mr. Liu, the car is waiting downstairs. Shall we head back to the hotel?" The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Ken followed but remained silent, clearly wanting to ask something. "Go ahead," I said. "Spit it out." He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "That woman, Qin Wantong." He paused. She looked completely heartbroken. I didn't answer. The elevator reached the top floor. The doors slid open. I walked to the presidential suite, swiped my key card, and stepped inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering night skyline of Hiching, the city lights stretching endlessly into the distance. A million lights stretched across the city like a sea of stars. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, silently looking out over the city where I'd spent more than 20 years of my life. Then, without warning, my mind drifted back to that night 7 years ago. Qin Wantong had looked at me with those same red, tear-filled eyes. But back then, she hadn't asked, "Do you still hate me?" Instead, she'd looked at me with disappointment and anger. "Lin Yu, how could you do this? How could you cheat my father out of his money? How could you betray me?" I told her I hadn't done any of it. She didn't believe me. She chose to believe someone else. Just then, the doorbell rang. I frowned and walked over to the door. Looking through the peephole, I saw Qin Wantong standing outside. She was leaning against the hallway wall. Half of her hair had come loose, her makeup was smeared from crying, and she clutched her phone so tightly it looked like a crumpled piece of paper that could be blown away by the wind. She had found my room. I stayed where I was. I didn't open the door. A moment later, her phone rang. She answered, her voice hoarse. "I know he's on the top floor. I'm not leaving. I'll wait until he comes out." She hung up, slowly slid down the wall, and sat on the carpet outside my door, pulling her knees to her chest. She buried her face in them as her shoulders shook with uncontrollable sobs. I quietly turned away and walked back to the window. Ken stood silently in the living room, glancing from the door to me, but he didn't say a word. After a long silence, I finally spoke. "Ken, have the night group files on my desk tomorrow morning." "Yes, Mr. Liu." Outside, one by one, the lights across the city began to disappear as midnight approached. The hallway outside fell quiet. Nearly 20 minutes passed. I never opened the door, but through the thick wooden door, I could still hear Qin Wantong's broken sobs. Every now and then, a passing guest would stop and ask with concern, "Ma'am, are you all right?" Each time, Ken would politely step in. "Everything is fine. Please keep moving." But Qin Wantong never left. She simply remained seated outside my room, leaning against the wall as if she had nowhere else in the world to go. I continued staring out at the city. An unlit cigarette rested between my fingers. I had quit smoking 7 years ago, not because I wanted to, because in prison I simply couldn't afford cigarettes. At 1:20 a.m., the sharp click of high heels echoed through the hallway. Fast, angry. Every step carried barely restrained fury. Then I heard Qin Wantong's startled voice. "Shihang, what are you doing here?" A man's cold voice answered immediately. "You're sitting outside another man's hotel room? Qin Wantong, have you completely lost your mind?" It was Zhao Shihang, my former college classmate, Qin Wantong's current husband, and the key witness who helped send me to prison 7 years ago. The argument outside quickly grew louder. Zhao Shihang called her shameless. He shouted that she was humiliating him. Through her tears, Qin Wantong tried to explain. I just wanted to see him." Zhao let out a mocking laugh. "See him? What's there to see? He's just an ex-convict." That was enough. I turned around, walked to the door, and pulled it open. The bright hallway lights flooded into the room. Zhao Shihang stood there wearing a dark gray overcoat. His hair was slicked back so perfectly it almost looked wet. His face wore the same arrogant, superior smirk I remembered all too well. His hand was gripping Qin Wantong's arm so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The moment he saw me, he froze. Then the familiar mocking smile returned to his face. So, what should I call you now? Lu Chen. His eyes slowly swept over me before stopping on the Patek Philippe watch on my wrist. For a brief second, surprise flashed across his face. Then it disappeared beneath another sneer. Look at you. Dressed like some respectable gentleman. I guess prison fed you pretty well. Qin Wantong immediately pulled her arm free and stood beside him. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked at me as though she wanted to speak, but no words came out. I leaned casually against the doorframe, keeping my eyes fixed on Zhao without saying a single word. What? You don't recognize me? He stepped closer, lowering his voice into a threatening growl. Lin Yu, I was the one who sent you to prison. I stole your company. I married your wife. You can wear expensive suits and fancy watches all you want. To me, you'll always be nothing more than a stray dog. Qin Wantong grabbed his sleeve. Shihong, stop. Shut up. He violently shook her hand away before glaring at me again. You came back to tonight's reunion just to make her regret what she did, didn't you? Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. She's regretting everything. So what? She's still my wife. Li Group is still mine, Zhao said arrogantly. And you, Lin Yu, you're nobody. The hallway fell silent. For a few long seconds, neither of us spoke. I looked him straight in the eyes. All I saw was arrogance, contempt, and buried deep beneath it, the faintest trace of panic. He was testing me. He wanted me to lose control, to explode in anger, to prove I was still the same Lin Yu he had trampled 7 years ago. Instead, I smiled. Not bitterly, not mockingly, just a calm smile, almost filled with pity. Mr. Zhao, I said quietly, are you finished talking? He blinked, completely caught off guard. Without waiting for an answer, I turned around and walked back into the suite. I picked up my phone from the coffee table and dialed a number. The call connected almost instantly. Mr. Ma, this is Lu Chun. I need a favor. A respectful voice immediately came through the speaker. Mr. Lu, just say the word. Anything. I attended a class reunion in your third-floor banquet hall tonight. I'm now staying in the presidential suite. There's someone shouting outside my room and disturbing my rest. Who is it? Mr. Ma asked immediately. I'll deal with it right away. Not yet. I just wanted to confirm something. This hotel was acquired last year by an offshore company from Southeast Asia, wasn't it? That's correct, Mr. Lu. You're the controlling shareholder of that company, which means you're the sole owner of this hotel. Good. Then come upstairs. I'd like you to have a little chat with my friend outside. I ended the call. When I looked up, Zhao's face had turned pale. Not from fear, from disbelief. He stared at my phone, trying to decide whether that conversation had been real or just an elaborate bluff. Qin Wantong was equally stunned. Her eyes moved back and forth between Zhao and me. The grief on her face slowly gave way to confusion. 5 minutes later, Mr. Ma arrived. He was a chubby man in his 50s, wearing pajamas underneath a trench coat. He was breathing heavily as if he had sprinted all the way upstairs. Behind him were the hotel manager and 2 security guards. The moment he saw me, Mr. Ma bowed repeatedly. Mr. Lu, I'm so sorry. I sincerely apologize that you had to deal with this. I pointed toward Zhao. This is Mr. Zhao. Please escort him out. And add his name to the hotel's blacklist, effective immediately. Mr. Ma glanced at Zhao only once. Without saying another word, he turned to the manager. You heard Mr. Lu. Do it now. Zhao's face instantly darkened. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You think buying some lousy hotel is enough to scare me? Lin Yu, who the hell do you think you are? Li Group brings in 5 billion yuan in revenue every year. What exactly do you have to fight me with? I walked right up to him until only a few inches separated us. Close enough to clearly see the bloodshot veins in his eyes. Mr. Zhao, I said calmly, you're going to have a very busy day tomorrow. I suggest you go home tonight and take a good look at your company's financial statements. His pupils shrank. What did you just say? I didn't answer. I simply turned around and walked back into my suite. Behind me, I heard Mr. Ma's voice. Sir, please leave immediately, or I'll have security escort you out. Then Qin Huangtong spoke softly. Shihong, let's go. Before leaving, Zhao shouted one last threat. Lin Yu, remember this. Tomorrow, you'll learn what happens when you cross me. The suite door slowly closed. The voices outside gradually faded into silence. I walked back to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the hotel parking lot. A few minutes later, Zhao Shihong appeared, dragging Qin Huangtong behind him. He shoved her into a white Porsche Cayenne so violently that the entire vehicle shook when the door slammed shut. The headlights came on. The engine roared. The Porsche sped out of the parking lot like a wild beast. As the car drove away, Qin Huangtong turned toward the hotel. Even from that distance, I saw her press her palm gently against the passenger side window. She kept it there for a long time. Only after the car disappeared into the darkness did Ken quietly step out from the shadows of the living room. A tablet rested in his hands. Mr. Liu, all financial records from Zhao Shihong's 3 subsidiaries have been organized. Most of the tax violations are connected to the Chengdu project. The falsified invoices total approximately 20 million yuan. The entire evidence chain has been completed. We can submit everything to the Economic Investigation Bureau first thing tomorrow morning. He paused before swiping to the next page. Also, Night Group's board meeting is tomorrow. They'll be discussing their Southeast Asia expansion. Zhao Shihong plans to propose a partnership with Taiwan Group. A faint smile appeared on Ken's face. That company belongs to you, doesn't it? I simply nodded. I didn't say a word. Ken put away the tablet. He hesitated for a moment before asking a question he knew he probably shouldn't. Mr. Liu. Qin Huangtong. She really looks sorry, Ken said quietly. Are you really going to? Ken. I cut him off before he could finish. How many years have you worked for me? 4 years. And in those 4 years, have you ever seen me do anything without solid proof? He shook his head. No. Then you should understand. I turned back toward the window. I didn't come back for revenge. Outside, the hitching bridge glowed brightly in the distance. Beneath it, the river was as black as ink, reflecting the stars above like a giant mirror. I came back to take back what's mine. Ken didn't say another word. He gave a respectful nod and quietly left the room. Once the door closed, I was alone. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, cupped some cold water in my hands, and splashed it across my face. The man staring back at me in the mirror looked cold. His eyes were cold. His expression was cold. Even his breathing seemed cold. But only I knew the truth. My hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid. Not because seeing Qin Huangtong sitting outside my hotel room had broken my heart. It was because of another memory. 7 years ago, she had been sitting exactly the same way in the courthouse hallway. Her knees hugged tightly against her chest. Her face buried in her arms. Back then, I thought she was crying because she regretted what she'd done. I was wrong. Later, I found out she wasn't crying over me. She was waiting for a phone call. Waiting for Zhao Shihong to tell her everything was finished. Finished. I went to prison. They got married. I walked out of the bathroom, picked up my phone, and opened a conversation with an unsaved number. I typed a single message. Proceed as planned tomorrow. The reply came almost immediately. Got it, boss. I switched off my phone, lay down on the bed, and closed my eyes. But the memories wouldn't stop. It wasn't the courtroom that came back to me. It wasn't the prison bars. It wasn't even Qin Huangtong's tear-streaked face. It was my father's back. The last time I saw him, he was standing outside our company's building. He looked back at me, smiled, and said, "You. Dad believes in you." The next day, he was dead, killed instantly in a car accident. Everyone called it an accident. I never believed them. My father had driven that same road for over 20 years. He knew every sharp turn. He knew when traffic was heavy. He knew exactly where to slow down. There was no way he would lose control like that. Unless someone had tampered with his car. Later, investigators found a document inside the wreckage of his car. That very document became the key piece of evidence Qin Wantong used against me in court. I stared at the ceiling with my eyes wide open. 7 years ago, I believed I had only lost my marriage, my company, and 1 year of my freedom. 7 years later, I finally understood. I had lost far more than that, but it didn't matter anymore. Everything they took from me, I was going to take back. Every last bit of it. Dawn slowly broke outside the hotel window. At 9 a.m. The next morning, officers from the Economic Investigation Unit took Zhao Shihong into custody. Ken brought me the news. He walked into the suite carrying a cup of coffee. His expression remained calm, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. The East City branch accounts have been frozen. Zhao Shihong was taken in for questioning. He still hasn't been released. I accepted the coffee and took a sip. Black, no sugar, scalding hot. Where's Qin Wantong? At Night Group headquarters. They were supposed to hold a board meeting this morning, but it was postponed after Zhao Shihong was detained. Ken paused before adding, "She called you 17 times. I set my coffee down and picked up my phone. 17 missed calls. Every one of them was from Qin Wantong. There were also 12 unread text messages. I didn't read a single one. I deleted them all immediately." Mr. Liu, Ken continued, Night Group has already launched an internal investigation into Zhao Shihong. They believe someone is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Right now, you're their #1 suspect. I smiled faintly. Let them suspect. There's one more thing. Ken opened his tablet. The representatives from Thailand's Hua Group have already arrived. The meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. in the hotel conference room. Night Group still has no idea that you're the owner of Hua Group. They've sent a delegation to negotiate the partnership. He looked up at me. The team is being led by their vice president, Qin Wantong. I looked at Ken. He continued, "She volunteered for the assignment. Apparently she wanted to stay away from the fallout surrounding Zhao Shihong. And she also wanted a chance to meet you alone." I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up and walked toward the window. The afternoon sun reflected off the glass buildings across the street, filling the room with a blinding white light. At 2 p.m. the meeting was held as scheduled in the hotel's conference room. It wasn't a large room. At most, it could seat 20 people. A long conference table stretched through the center, covered with a dark tablecloth. Each seat had a bottle of mineral water and a printed meeting agenda placed neatly in front of it. The projector was already running. Across the screen were the words. The blue backdrop behind me displayed the words, Night Group and Thailand Hua Group Strategic Cooperation Negotiation. I sat at the head of the conference table. Ken stood quietly behind me. The 6-member delegation from Hua Group sat on both sides of me, our heads of legal, finance, technology, and marketing. Every one of them had spent years working with me in Southeast Asia. I had personally trained each of them, and every single one was capable of running an entire division on their own. The Night Group delegation hadn't arrived yet. At 2:05 p.m., the conference room door opened. Qin Wantong walked in first. Behind her were 5 people, 2 vice presidents, the legal director, the finance director, and her secretary. She was wearing a perfectly tailored white skirt suit. Her hair was neatly pinned up. Her makeup was flawless. Her posture was confident and composed. She looked nothing like the woman who had been sitting outside my hotel room, crying her heart out the night before. But the moment she saw me, the cold, confident CEO mask cracked. She froze for a split second. Her footsteps faltered. Her pupils contracted. Without realizing it, she tightened her grip on the folder in her hands until the edges crumpled. The vice president walking behind her noticed nothing. He continued speaking as they entered. Ms. Qin, the Hua Group representatives have already arrived. The gentleman sitting at the head of the table must be. His voice faded as he sensed the strange atmosphere in the room. Qin Wantong took a slow, steady breath. Then she walked to the opposite end of the conference table and sat directly across from me. A 7-meter table separated us. We looked at each other in complete silence. The atmosphere instantly became tense. The Night Group team exchanged confused glances, clearly wondering what was happening. The Hua Group delegation, on the other hand, remained perfectly calm. They all knew exactly who I was. And they all knew exactly who the woman sitting across from me was. Ms. Qin, I said calmly. My tone is casual, as if we were discussing any ordinary business deal. Welcome. Her lips moved slightly, as if she wanted to say something. In the end, she simply nodded. Mr. Liu, she said, deliberately emphasizing those two words. This is Night Group's cooperation proposal. Please take a look. Ken accepted the documents and placed them neatly in front of me. I didn't even open the file. Instead, I looked directly at Qin Wantong. Ms. Qin, before we discuss any cooperation, there's something I'd like to confirm. She nodded. Go ahead. Who is actually making the decisions at Night Group now? She frowned slightly. I'm the vice president in charge of Southeast Asia operations. I wasn't asking for your job title, I interrupted. I'm asking whether every decision you make still requires Zhao Shihong's approval. The conference room fell completely silent. Everyone from Night Group looked stunned. Qin Wantong slowly tapped her fingers against the table twice, carefully controlling her emotions. Mr. Liu. Her voice softened. Mr. Zhao couldn't attend today's meeting because of a personal matter. I'll communicate all of his decisions on his behalf. A personal matter? I repeated the words with a faint smile. Ms. Qin, do you know exactly what kind of personal matter Mr. Zhao is dealing with today? She didn't answer. He was taken in this morning by the Economic Investigation Unit. He's being investigated for issuing fraudulent invoices totaling 20 million yuan. The Night Group delegation erupted. The two vice presidents immediately began whispering to each other. The legal director hurriedly pulled out his phone and started sending messages. The finance director's face turned completely pale. Qin Wantong's expression barely changed. But beneath the table, her hands had already clenched tightly into fists. Mr. Liu, she said through gritted teeth, that's an internal matter for Night Group. It has nothing to do with you. Why would I care? I replied with a faint smile. I'm simply not comfortable negotiating a 10 billion yuan project with a vice president. What happens if the vice president is also taken away for questioning one day? Who exactly would be responsible for this project then? I slowly stood up. Placing both hands on the conference table, I leaned forward slightly. Ms. Qin, I didn't come here today to negotiate. I came here to inform you. Hua Group has already awarded the Southeast Asia project to another company. Night Group is out. Silence filled the conference room. Qin Wantong's face flushed bright red. A second later, all the color drained away. She shot to her feet so suddenly that her chair slammed backward into the wall with a loud crash. Lin Yu. She shouted the name I hadn't heard anyone call me in 7 years. Everyone in the conference room heard it. Her voice trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. You came back just for this, didn't you? You came back only to get revenge on me. And on the Qin family. I looked at her without saying a word. What happened 7 years ago? I can explain. It wasn't what you think. It wasn't me. Ms. Qin. I interrupted her calmly. My voice wasn't loud, but every single word landed in the room like a hammer. I don't want to discuss what happened 7 years ago in a conference room like this, I said calmly. But if you insist on bringing it up. I pulled a document from the folder and slammed it onto the table with a sharp crack. Then take a look for yourself. I pushed the file toward Qin Wantong. The very first page was a bank transfer record. The date was from 7 years ago. Sender, Qin Huayuan. Receiver, Zhao Shihong. Amount, 5 million yuan. The memo read, "Legal fees." Qin Wantong stared at the document. Little by little, the color drained from her face. I spoke slowly. "Your father, Qin Huayuan, transferred 5 million yuan to Zhao Shihong 1 month before my trial. Officially, it was listed as legal fees. But in reality, enough!" Qin Wantong suddenly slammed both hands onto the table. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "My father isn't that kind of person." "He isn't." I looked at her calmly. "Then tell me, what kind of person is he?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Before anyone could speak again, the conference room door burst open. Zhao Shihong stormed inside. His hair was a mess. His tie hung crooked around his neck. His eyes were bloodshot, as though he had run all the way there without stopping. He charged straight toward me, fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "Lin Yu, you set me up. You're the one who handed those documents to the Economic Investigation Unit." Qin Wantong instinctively stepped in front of me, trying to shield me. I stopped her with a single look. Then I stood face to face with Zhao Shihong. "Mr. Zhao?" I asked calmly. "Do you have any proof?" "I don't need proof. I know it was you. What exactly do you want from me?" For a split second, madness flashed across his face. Without warning, he swung his fist straight at me. I didn't move. The punch stopped barely 2 centimeters from my face. Not because he changed his mind. Someone had grabbed his wrist from behind. It was my bodyguard, a dong. At 6'4" and over 240 pounds, the former Special Forces soldier looked like a wall. His hand clamped around Zhao Shihong's wrist like a steel vise. Zhao's face twisted in pain. "A dong." I spoke without raising my voice. "Call the police." Qin Wantong rushed over and grabbed my arm. Her nails nearly dug through my sleeve. "Please, don't call the police." He just acted on impulse. I lowered my eyes to the hands gripping my arm. 7 years ago, those very same hands had pointed at me in court. He cheated me out of my money. 7 years ago, those same hands had carried box after box of so-called evidence to the witness stand. 7 years ago, those same hands had never once reached out to help me. And now, they were holding on to me as if I were the only thing keeping her alive. I gently pulled my arm away. Looking straight into her tear-filled eyes, I asked, "Qin Wantong, do you remember what you said to me 7 years ago? When I knelt in court and begged you to believe me?" Her tears poured down even faster. Her entire body trembled. I said. Her voice cracked. "Lin Yu, go to hell." The conference room was so silent that the hum of the air conditioner sounded deafening. A dong had Zhao Shihong pinned against the wall. He struggled desperately, still cursing at me. Every member of the night group delegation had already stood up, frozen in panic. Meanwhile, everyone from Hua Group remained perfectly composed, as if they were watching a play whose ending they already knew. Qin Wantong's legs suddenly gave way. She grabbed the edge of the conference table before slowly collapsing into her chair. Burying her face in her hands, she sobbed uncontrollably. "I regret it." Her voice was muffled between her fingers, broken, hoarse, like shattered glass. "Lin Yu, I regret everything. I really do." I looked at her in silence for a long moment. Then I calmly gathered the documents from the table, placed them back into my briefcase, and turned toward the door. As I passed Zhao Shihong, I stopped for a second. "Mr. Zhao, the tax investigation is only the beginning." His shouting stopped instantly. "You'd better spend some time thinking about how much more evidence I have on you." Without another word, I walked out of the conference room. Behind me, the sound of approaching police sirens echoed through the hallway. A dong followed close behind. "Mr. Liu, the Economic Investigation Unit has arrived." I nodded. "Tell them to follow the standard procedure." "Yes, sir." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Just before they closed, a heartbreaking scream echoed from the far end of the hallway. "Lin Yu." The elevator doors slowly slid shut. The floor indicator changed from 3 to 2, then 1. Ding. The doors opened again. The hotel lobby was busy with people coming and going. No one paid any attention to me. I walked through the revolving doors and stepped outside. The afternoon sun was blinding. I narrowed my eyes. Adong had already released Zhao Shihong and followed me to the waiting car. "Mr. Liu," he asked, opening the rear door. "Shall we return to the hotel?" I shook my head. "West side of the city." Adong looked confused. "What's there?" I looked out toward the road ahead. "A person," I replied. "There's someone I should have met 7 years ago." The car stopped at the entrance of the old cemetery on Hitching's west side. I told Adong to wait in the car and walked in alone. The cemetery was small, sitting halfway up a quiet hillside with the western mountains stretching behind it. The afternoon sun warmed my back, casting my long shadow across rows of silent tombstones, as if greeting those who rested there. After walking for about 5 minutes, I stopped in front of one grave. The photo on the headstone showed a middle-aged man with thick eyebrows, bright eyes, and the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. Even after all these years, it felt as though he was still looking at me. My father, Lin Jingbang. The inscription read, "Lin Jingbang born, 1963, died, 2016." Beloved father at the bottom was the name of the person who had erected the tombstone. Daughter, Lin Wan. Lin Wan. That had once been Qin Wantong's name. After marrying Zhao Shihong, she changed both her name and her surname. Yet, on my father's grave, she had signed herself as Lin Wan. She had arranged this tombstone after I was sent to prison. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was the one who helped send me to jail. Yet she was also the one who buried my father. I slowly crouched down, took out a handkerchief, and carefully wiped the dust from the headstone. On the stone platform lay a bouquet of flowers that had long since dried up. Judging by how withered they were, someone had left them there about a month ago. "Dad, I'm back." The smiling man in the photograph remained silent. "7 years ago when you died, I was locked inside a detention center. I couldn't even come to your funeral. Qin Wantong told me you passed away instantly. She said you didn't suffer. I don't know if that was true, but I've chosen to believe it." A cool breeze swept through the cemetery, rustling the pine and cypress trees. "Dad." "The company you left me was swallowed by Qin Huayuan. The bank took our house. I lost everything. But they couldn't take this." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black USB drive. A white label was attached to it. "Evidence. The morning you died, there was a file inside your car. Qin Wantong claimed it was evidence that I had committed commercial fraud. She said it proved I'd forged contracts and stolen money from the company. But I know that file was never mine. It belonged to you. It contained the evidence you spent years collecting against Qin Huayuan's money laundering operation. The only answer was silence. The morning you died, you were supposed to deliver those files to the prosecutor's office. You never made it. You crashed on the way. They called it an accident. I never believed that. 3 days before your death, Qin Huayuan called you. He warned you. Lin Jingbang. Think carefully before you continue digging into this. Some truths are better left buried." I slowly stood up, gripping the USB drive tightly in my hand. "Dad, the case you spent 3 years investigating. I'll finish it. The people you couldn't send to prison, I'll put them there. And everything they stole from us, I'll take it all back." I remained standing there for a long time. The sun slowly drifted from directly overhead toward the western mountains. The bright afternoon light faded into gold, then into deep orange, until the sky was painted crimson. My phone suddenly rang. It was Ken. "Mr. Liu, Qin Wantong is here." I turned toward the cemetery entrance. A black Audi had just pulled in. The driver's door opened, and Qin Wantong stepped out. She had taken off her suit jacket. Only a white button-up shirt remained, the sleeves rolled neatly to her elbows. Her hair had been let down from its bun, falling naturally over her shoulders. She spotted my car. Then she saw me halfway up the hill. Without hesitation, she started walking toward me. The sound of her high heels echoed across the stone pathway. Steady, slow, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. She stopped about 10 feet away. I knew I'd find you here. Her voice was hoarse, as though she'd been crying for hours. How did you know where I was? I asked. She gave a tired smile. Your car. Hitching isn't that big. Maybe you've changed your name to Luchan. But a car like yours is impossible to miss. I quietly looked her over. She wasn't wearing any makeup. Her eyes were swollen and red. Her lips were dry and cracked. She looked like someone who had rushed straight out after everything had fallen apart. Her white shirt was wrinkled. There was dust on the hem of her skirt. What about Zhao Shihong? I asked. He was released on bail, she replied softly. His lawyer handled the paperwork. But he isn't allowed to leave Hitching. His phone has to stay on 24 hours a day, and whenever the investigators summon him, he has to report immediately. You really think Zhao Shihong is the only one behind the fake invoice scheme? Qin Wantong slowly lifted her head and looked me straight in the eyes. I know he isn't. She paused before speaking again. But the Qin family's legal team will handle everything. I looked at her calmly. You really think they'll be able to save him? I don't know. Her voice trembled. I'm not here to talk about Zhao Shihong. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I only want to ask you one question. What is it? She looked at me without blinking. What do you really want? A gust of wind swept through the cemetery, blowing strands of hair across her face. She didn't brush them away. She simply stood there, waiting for my answer. I held her gaze for a long moment before speaking. Qin Wantong, do you remember asking me something 7 years ago? She looked confused. The morning my father died, you asked me whether I'd gone near his car. Her expression slowly changed. I told you I hadn't. But you called me a liar. You said someone had seen me in the parking lot. I took a slow step toward her. Now I'm asking you, who was that person? Her lips began to tremble. It was Zhao Shihong, wasn't it? My voice remained calm, but every word landed like a knife. He told you he saw me getting into my father's car. He told you I planted that document. He told you I only married you so I could steal your family's money. I looked directly into her eyes. Qin Wantong, have you ever really thought about any of it? If I truly wanted your family's money, why would I marry you? Wouldn't it have been much easier to simply work with your father? If I had forged that contract, why would I put my own name on it? Wouldn't using a shell company have been much safer? And if I had really stolen the company's money, why did I stay at the office after everything happened instead of running away? Did you ever stop to think about any of those questions? Tears streamed silently down Qin Wantong's face. I did. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I thought about them. When? I asked quietly. She slowly crouched beside my father's grave, her hands covering her face. 3 months after you went to prison. Her voice shook as she continued. I came to see you. The prison staff told me you refused every visit. I couldn't believe it, so I kept coming back. Every week. And every single time, they gave me the same answer. She lowered her head. Later, I found out it wasn't you who refused to see me. Someone had arranged for my visits to be blocked. I had no idea who was behind it. Until 6 months later, I met someone outside the prison. She slowly raised her head again. The setting sun reflected off the tears on her cheeks. It was old Lou, your father's former driver. My heart skipped. What did he tell you? Her voice trembled. He told me that the document found in your father's car had been prepared by your father himself. He also told me your father had been secretly investigating something for 3 years before he died, and all the evidence was stored on a USB drive. He said, "You had that USB drive." She looked directly at me. You still have it, don't you?" I didn't answer. She took another step toward me. "Do you still have it?" This time her voice was louder. "I do." Her eyes widened. "Then why didn't you hand it over? If you had, you never would have gone to prison. My father would have known the truth. We never would have." She couldn't finish. I finished the sentence for her. "We never would have divorced. You never would have married Zhao Shihong. You never would have become Night Group's vice president." She fell silent. After a long pause, I spoke again. "You think I never considered handing it over?" "I did. On my very first day in detention. But my lawyer stopped me. He told me the files on the USB drive had already been tampered with before I was arrested. Every important document had been deleted. The only files left were worthless." She stared at me in disbelief. "Who did it?" I looked at her calmly. "Take a guess." Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. Zhao Shihong." I nodded. "Yes, Zhao Shihong." Then I asked quietly, "But tell me, how did he get that USB drive?" "It was with you the entire time." She looked confused. "With me?" I interrupted before she could think further. "Qin Wantong, you were the one who handed that USB drive to Zhao Shihong." Every trace of color disappeared from her face. I continued, "Do you remember the night before my father's accident? You came to see me. You said you wanted to look through my father's belongings and keep something to remember him by. I gave you that USB drive. I told you it contained some of my father's work files. I asked you to see if there was anything you wanted to keep. The very next day, the USB drive disappeared. You told me that you had accidentally lost it." Qin Wantong's legs gave way beneath her. She grabbed my father's tombstone to keep herself from collapsing. Slowly, she slid down until she was sitting on the ground. I didn't know." Her voice trembled so badly it sounded as if every word had been pulled from deep underwater. I didn't know he would delete everything on it." Her voice trembled. "He only told me he wanted to take a look. He promised he'd return it afterward." I looked at her quietly. "And you believed him?" Qin Wantong lowered her head, unable to answer. After a long silence, I spoke again. "Qin Wantong, before my father died, he once said something." She slowly looked up. "He said, 'This daughter-in-law is even more dangerous than Qin Huayuan himself.'" Her entire body shook. I continued without changing my tone. "He saw right through you. You're not evil. You're just naive. And sometimes, naivety is far more dangerous than evil." The sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains. Darkness settled over the cemetery. In the distance, Ken honked the car horn. It was time to leave. I turned around and began walking toward the cemetery gate. I had only taken a few steps when Qin Wantong's voice drifted toward me, as light as a falling leaf. If I told you that the greatest regret of my life was asking you for that USB drive that night, would you believe me?" I never turned around. "I believe you." She looked up hopefully. "But you don't regret taking the USB drive. You regret that your life didn't become better after you took it." I paused for a moment. "If Zhao Shihong had treated you well, if Night Group had continued to thrive, would you regret what you did?" "No." I answered the question for her. "You're not sorry because you made the wrong choice. You're sorry because it didn't turn out the way you hoped. That's not remorse. That's disappointment." I walked through the cemetery gate. Behind me, Qin Wantong broke down completely. She wasn't quietly crying anymore. She was sobbing uncontrollably, like a child who had lost everything. The last rays of sunlight stretched her shadow across my father's grave. From a distance, it looked as though she was kneeling in confession. I never looked back. Some mistakes can be corrected. Some people can never be brought back. Once they're gone forever. I got into the car. Ken handed me a bottle of water. Mr. Liu, are you all right? I'm fine. I twisted the cap open and took a sip. Then I looked at Ken. Arrange a meeting for me. With Qin Huayuan. Ken paused in surprise. You want to meet Qin Huayuan? I shook my head. He wants to meet me. He already scheduled it. 3 days from now. At his private club. He says he wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? He wants to offer me 1 billion yuan. If I'll back off. A faint smile crossed my face as I set the water bottle aside. Tell him. I'll be there. And I'll bring exactly what he's looking for. The car slowly pulled away from the cemetery. In the rearview mirror, Qin Wantong was still kneeling beside my father's grave. Her figure became smaller and smaller, until she disappeared completely into the fading evening light. 3 days later, on the outskirts of Hiching stood Qin Huayuan's private club. The estate sat halfway up Phoenix Mountain and covered nearly 5 acres. The entire property was built in the style of a traditional Chinese garden. 2 ancient ginkgo trees, each over 200 years old, stood guard at the entrance, their thick branches blocking out most of the sunlight. From the outside, the place looked like nothing more than an ordinary private residence. Inside, it was breathtakingly luxurious. The rooms were furnished entirely with handcrafted mahogany furniture. The walls were decorated with intricate Nanmu wood carvings highlighted with gold thread. The floors were covered with imported marble, every slab carefully selected by hand. The club wasn't open to the public. It existed solely for Qin Huayuan to entertain family members, close friends, and important business partners. Today, I wasn't here as any of those. Ken stopped the car outside the entrance. I stepped out and adjusted my suit. Waiting by the doorway was a middle-aged man dressed in a black traditional Chinese tunic. His expression never changed. His sharp eyes immediately gave away his profession. Career bodyguard. He bowed slightly. Mr. Liu, Chairman Qin is waiting for you inside. This way, please. I followed him through a moon gate. The bodyguard slid the wooden door open and stepped aside. Chairman Qin. Mr. Liu has arrived. Inside the tea room sat Qin Huayuan, 67 years old, founder and chairman of Knight Group. He wore a dark blue tang suit. His gray hair was neatly combed. Deep wrinkles lined his face, as though carved by years of hardship. But his eyes were still razor-sharp, the kind of sharpness only someone who had survived decades of ruthless business battles could possess. Experienced, calculating, cold. A set of purple clay teaware rested on the table before him. Fresh tea steamed gently into the air, filling the room with a calm, soothing fragrance. He slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. A faint smile appeared on his lips. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was the perfectly measured smile of an old hunter studying the prey that had willingly walked into his trap. Sit. I walked over and took the seat directly across from him. The bodyguard quietly stepped out, and the door clicked shut behind him. Now only the two of us remained in the tea room. The room was so quiet that the gentle bubbling of the teapot was the only sound. Qin Huayuan calmly poured 2 cups of tea. He pushed one toward me and lifted the other to his lips. After gently blowing on it, he took a slow sip. Lu Chen. He repeated my name slowly, almost as if he were savoring it. Vice President of the Southeast Asian Chinese Chamber of Commerce. The man who actually controls Hua Group. You also own 7 other companies across Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore. Your total assets are worth around 20 billion yuan. He set his teacup down and looked straight at me. 6 years. You went from having nothing to building a 20 billion yuan empire. Lin Yu, you're even more capable than your father ever was. I looked at him calmly. My father never built his fortune by swallowing other people's companies. Qin Huayuan smiled. The smile didn't disappear. Only one finger lightly tapped the side of his teacup. So, you came all the way here just to tell me that? I shook my head. No. You invited me. That's right. I did. He leaned back comfortably in his chair, folded his hands over his stomach, and spoke as casually as if we were old friends sharing afternoon tea. Lin Yu, I've never liked wasting time. I asked you here because I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? He answered without hesitation. Back off. Stop going after Night Group. Stop going after Zhao Shihong. And stop going after Wantong. He paused for a moment. I'll give you 1 billion yuan. He spoke the number as casually as if it were $10. 1 billion, I repeated. That's what you think it will cost to make me walk away? He nodded. That's right. I looked him in the eyes. Chairman Qin, do you really think I came back for money? For the first time, something unreadable flashed across his sharp eyes. Then tell me, what did you come back for? Instead of answering, I reached into my briefcase. I took out a document envelope and placed it on the tea table. Then I slowly pushed it toward him. Look at this first. He glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. What's inside? A recording. From 7 years ago. His fingers paused for the briefest moment. What recording? You can find out yourself. Silence settled over the tea room. After several seconds, Qin Huayuan finally reached for the envelope. He opened it. Inside was a USB drive and several printed documents. He picked up the documents first. The first page was a phone record from 7 years earlier. A 47-minute phone call between Qin Huayuan and Zhao Shihong. The second page was a bank transfer record. 7 years old. The money had been sent from Qin Huayuan's personal account to a law firm. Amount: 5 million yuan. No memo. The third page was a scanned contract. Party A, Night Group. Party B, a shell company. Contract value, 20 million yuan. The listed service was consulting. The legal representative of that shell company was Qin Huayuan's personal driver. Qin Huayuan's expression didn't change at all. He calmly placed the papers back on the table. Then he picked up the USB drive, examined it for a moment, and asked, "What is this supposed to prove?" "The answer to the question you asked me earlier is on that USB drive." He remained silent. A few seconds later, he plugged the USB drive into the audio system beside the tea table. The recording began. First came a burst of static. Then 2 voices filled the room. One belonged to Qin Huayuan. Calm, steady. The voice of a man used to giving orders. The other belonged to Zhao Shihong. Much younger, nervous, eager to please. The recording was crystal clear. Every word landed like a knife. Qin Huayuan's voice spoke first. "Are you certain you put the document inside Lin Jingbang's car?" Zhao Shihong answered immediately. "Absolutely. I put it there myself. That idiot Lin Yu still has no idea what's happening." Qin Huayuan asked, "What about Wantong?" Zhao Shihong laughed softly. "She already believes everything. I told her Lin Yu forged contracts and embezzled company funds. I told her all the evidence was inside that document. She agreed to testify against him in court." Qin Huayuan replied calmly, "Good. Once Lin Jingbang is dead, and Lin Yu is in prison, the Lin family's company will belong to us. Finish this job, and I'll reward you well." Zhao Shihong answered without hesitation. "Thank you, Chairman Qin." Then he asked, "What about Wantong?" Qin Huayuan's voice remained emotionless. "Wantong will marry you. That was always part of the deal." The recording went silent for a brief moment. Then Qin Huayuan spoke one final sentence. "Lin Jingbang spent 3 years investigating me. He never imagined that, in the end, his own son would take the fall for him." The recording ended. Silence returned to the tea room. It was so quiet that you could almost hear a heartbeat. Qin Huayuan sat perfectly still. His hands rested on the tea table, but his fingers had stopped tapping. His face showed almost no emotion. Only one tiny detail betrayed him. As the recording played, his pupils narrowed instead of widening. It wasn't fear. It was pure, uncontrollable rage. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Where did you get this?" His voice was so low it sounded as if every word had been forced out through gritted teeth. From Zhao Shihang's phone. I met his eyes without flinching. He has a habit of recording every important phone call. He says it's for self-protection. He never imagined those recordings would one day become evidence against him. Qin Huayuan slowly clenched his fist. When did you get them? 2 years ago. I paid a hacker 3 million yuan to remotely access Zhao Shihang's phone. He had 7 years' worth of call recordings saved. More than 3,000 in total. I listened to every single one. I paused. Chairman Qin. There was more than just this one conversation between you and Zhao Shihang. Without warning, Qin Huayuan shot to his feet. For a 67-year-old man, he moved unbelievably fast. He slammed one hand onto the tea table and leaned toward me. The calmness had disappeared from his eyes. Only killing intent remained. Lin Yu, you think you can threaten me with this? I stood up as well. We faced each other across the table. I'm not threatening you. I'm simply showing you what I have. And now, I'm giving you 2 choices. I held up one finger. First, turn yourself in. Confess everything. Return every cent you stole. Accept every charge. Serve your sentence. If you do that, you can still spend the rest of your life in peace after you're released. Then I raised a second finger. Second, I won't send this evidence to the hitching prosecutors. I'll hand everything directly to the provincial authorities and to the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Everyone with the power to destroy you will have it. At that point, it won't be a question of how many years you serve. It'll be whether you ever leave prison alive. Qin Huayuan stared at me for a long time. Then, he suddenly burst into laughter. Loud, wild, almost exaggerated. He laughed so hard he bent over, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. But there wasn't a trace of amusement in them. His eyes were as cold as a frozen lake. Calm on the surface. Nothing but ice underneath. Lin Yu. He slowly straightened up and wiped the corner of his eye. You're more capable than your father. He investigated me for 3 years. And found nothing. You spent 7 years. And actually found evidence. He smiled coldly. But you've forgotten one thing. I looked at him. What? He stared at me. How did your father die? My heart skipped a beat. A car accident. He repeated the words slowly. A car accident. A chilling smile spread across his face. But have you ever wondered? Who arranged that accident? I didn't answer. You've spent 7 years investigating. You found the recordings. The bank transfers. The contracts. But did you ever discover who cut your father's brake line the morning he died? My hands turned cold. Qin Huayuan calmly sat back down. He picked up his teacup and took another sip. You'll never find him. He died 6 years ago. Terminal cancer. Before he died, he came to see me. He apologized. He said he regretted what he had done to your father. He said he had nightmares every single night. Qin Huayuan gently placed the teacup back onto the table. Then he looked at me. Lin Yu, you think you're uncovering the truth. But the truth is far darker than you can imagine. What you found is only the tip of the iceberg. You have no idea what's hidden underneath. He paused. Do you know why I asked you here today? It wasn't to make a deal. It was to warn you. If you keep digging, everyone loses. The words hit me like a hammer. They were exactly the same words my father had heard years ago. Keep digging and everyone loses. 7 years ago. Those words led to my father's death. 7 years later. The same man was saying them to me. Without saying a word, I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out another document. Then I tossed it onto the tea table. Take a look. Qin Huayuan glanced down. For the first time that afternoon, his expression changed. The document was my father's autopsy report. not the official report released by the police. This was an independent forensic reassessment. The conclusion read, cause of death, fatal blunt force trauma resulting from a vehicle collision after the driver lost control. However, further inspection of the vehicle's braking system found clear evidence of deliberate damage to the brake line of the right front wheel. The report was clear. The brake line had been deliberately cut with a sharp object. The incision was clean and precise. There was no doubt it had been intentional. Conclusion: homicide, not an accident. For the first time, the smile disappeared from Qin Huayuan's face. I looked at him calmly. You think I didn't already know? I had my father's autopsy re-examined 3 days after he died. But back then, I was locked up in detention. I couldn't get my hands on the report. After I got out, I fled to Southeast Asia. But I never stopped investigating. For 7 years. I paused. The man you hid for 7 years. I found him. He was already dying. But before he passed away, he signed a sworn statement. I have that too. I reached into my briefcase again and pulled out another document. It was handwritten. The final page carried both a signature and a fingerprint. The name at the bottom read, Xiao Dihu, Qin Huayuan's former driver. The statement read, under Chairman Qin Huayuan's orders, I deliberately cut the brake line on Lin Jingbang's vehicle in 2016, causing the brakes to fail and ultimately leading to the fatal car accident. Qin Huayuan's hand began shaking uncontrollably. His teacup tipped over. Tea spilled across the table and dripped onto the marble floor with soft, steady taps. I looked at him. I've already submitted this statement to the provincial procuratorate. I didn't come here today to negotiate. I came to officially let you know. Every trace of color drained from Qin Huayuan's face. His lips moved, but no words came out. I calmly packed the documents back into my briefcase and stood up. Chairman Qin, my father waited 7 years. You owe him a life. I waited 7 years too. And what you owe me is far more than that. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Qin Huayuan's old voice trembled like a dead branch shaking in the rain. You can't do this to me. Yuan is the mother of your child. I stopped. Slowly, I turned around. What did you just say? Qin Huayuan struggled to his feet, gripping the edge of the table. Yuan was pregnant with your child 7 years ago, before you went to prison. She had an abortion. Zhao Shihang told her that you'd never come back. He said the child would grow up without a father. I stood there without moving. It felt as though time had stopped. Qin Huayuan continued quietly. She regretted it. Not the abortion. She regretted believing Zhao Shihang. She once told me, if she had another chance, she would wait for you, no matter how many years it took. I looked at him coldly. You're only telling me this because you want me to spare you. He shook his head. I'm telling you because I'm not the only person you've got reason to hate. I stared at him for several long seconds. Then I pulled the door open and walked out. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead. The lights were dim. My footsteps stayed steady. So did my breathing. Only I knew. My hands were shaking. Our child. Mine and Qin Wantong's. Gone. 7 years ago. Because Zhao Shihang convinced her I would never leave prison alive. I walked out of the club. The afternoon sun was blinding. I narrowed my eyes. Ken was already waiting with the car door open. I got inside. Back to the hotel, Mr. Liu? No. I looked out the window. The hospital. Ken glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Are you feeling all right? I shook my head. I need to see someone. He immediately understood who I meant. He asked nothing else. The engine started. The car slowly drove away from Phoenix Mountain and merged into the city traffic. Outside the window, buildings and streets rushed by. Inside the car, there was complete silence. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The faces running through my mind weren't Qin Huayuan's. They weren't Zhao Shihang's. They weren't even Qin Wantong's. Instead, I saw the blurry outline of a child I had never met. If that child had survived, they would be 6 years old now, old enough to start first grade, hitching people's hospital, outside the obstetrics and gynecology department. I didn't go inside. I simply stood at the window at the end of the hallway, watching cars move through the parking lot below. Ken stood quietly a few steps behind me. He held a freshly obtained medical file in his hands. He hesitated, then silently handed it to me. I opened it. It was a surgical record from 7 years ago. Patient, Lin Yuan. Procedure, induced abortion. Attending physician, Dr. Lu Xiong. Preoperative diagnosis, early pregnancy. Gestational age, approximately 9 weeks, just over 2 months. I stared at the paper. For 2 whole months, my child had been alive inside my wife's womb. And before I ever had the chance to know, that life was taken away. I closed the file and handed it back to Ken. Where's Qin Wantong? Inpatient ward 603, 6th floor. He checked his notes before continuing. She was admitted yesterday afternoon with acute gastroenteritis. The doctors want to keep her under observation for 48 hours. What about Zhao Shihong? He's out on bail. He isn't allowed to leave hitching, but he was able to visit the hospital. The nurses said he came once yesterday. He stayed less than 20 minutes. Apparently they argued. He slammed the door on his way out. I didn't say anything. I turned and walked toward the inpatient building. The elevator slowly climbed. I watched the numbers light up one after another. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The doors opened. The hallway smelled strongly of disinfectant. White walls, white lights, white sheets. Everything was so bright it almost hurt my eyes. Ward 603. The door was closed. I looked through the small glass window before going in. Qin Wantong was lying on the hospital bed in a blue and white striped patient gown. Her long hair spread across the pillow. Her face was pale. Her lips had lost all their color. Her eyes were closed. I couldn't tell whether she was asleep or simply resting. A bouquet of flowers sat on the bedside table. They had already started to wilt. The petals had curled and turned yellow, as if no one had touched them for days. I quietly pushed the door open and walked inside. In the silent room, even my footsteps sounded loud. Her eyelashes fluttered. Then she slowly opened her eyes. The moment she saw me, countless emotions flashed across her face. Shock, disbelief, hope, despair, all at once. You! Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse like sandpaper scraping against glass. I pulled a chair over and sat beside her bed. She looked at me without blinking. How did you know I was here? She tried to sit up. I reached out and gently pressed her shoulder. Don't. Stay lying down. She obediently lay back. Her eyes never left me, as though she was afraid I would disappear the moment she looked away. I looked at her quietly. I have a few questions. She nodded. Ask me. I spoke calmly. First question. Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant 7 years ago? Her entire body froze. Her eyes widened instantly. Her pupils shrank. Her lips began trembling. She gripped the bedsheet so tightly her knuckles turned white. You! How did you know? I looked at her. Answer the question. She slowly closed her eyes. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes and rolled into her hair. Finally, she spoke. Because Zhao Shihong told me that you'd be in prison for at least 3 years. He said when you got out, you'd have nothing. He asked me how we were supposed to raise a child. He also said, if I kept the baby, people would point fingers. They'd say the child's father was a criminal. I looked at her. And you believed him. She slowly opened her red, bloodshot eyes. I didn't know who else to believe. At that time, everyone said you had stolen the money. Everyone said you forged the contracts. Everyone said you were a fraud. My parents believed it. Zhao Shihong believed it. The company's lawyers believed it. I was completely alone. Who was I supposed to trust? I answered quietly, "You could have trusted me. I told you I was innocent. I told you I had a clear conscience." She broke down crying again. After a long silence, I asked, "Second question. Was the abortion your own decision? Or did Zhao Shihang force you?" Her lips moved, but no words came out. I looked directly into her eyes. "Qin Wantong, I want the truth." After several seconds, she finally whispered, He took me to the hospital. He said everything had already been arranged. The doctor told me the procedure would be quick. They said it wouldn't hurt. They told me that once it was over, everything would be behind us. We could start over." I stared at her. "So, he took you there himself?" She nodded. "Yes." "When you signed the consent form, did you ever stop to think, that child belonged to me too?" She couldn't answer. She only cried. I watched her quietly for a long time. Then I asked my final question. "If I told you that your own father admitted everything, would you believe me?" She stopped crying. Her eyes slowly widened. "What?" I continued. 7 years ago, your father discovered my dad had gathered evidence against him. So he ordered someone to tamper with my father's car. My father wasn't killed in an accident. He was murdered." Qin Wantong stared at me in complete disbelief. "That's impossible." She suddenly sat bolt upright. The foreline jerked violently. The needle was ripped from the back of her hand. Tiny drops of blood landed on the white hospital sheet like scattered red flowers. She didn't even seem to notice the pain. Her eyes remained fixed on me, filled with nothing but shock. She stared at me, her eyes redder than ever. "My dad would never do that. He would never kill anyone. You're lying. You're lying to me." I looked at her calmly. "I'm not lying." I took out my phone, opened the scanned document, and handed it to her. "This is Xiao Dihu's sworn statement. Read it yourself." Her trembling hands took the phone. She read each line slowly. With every word, the color drained from her face until she looked as pale as the hospital sheets. "No. That's impossible." Her voice sounded weak, as if it had been pulled from deep underwater. "My dad wouldn't. He wouldn't do something like that. He would." I kept my voice steady. "He would do anything to take my family's company. Even murder." Qin Wantong dropped the phone onto the bed as though it had burned her. She wrapped her arms around herself and leaned against the headboard, trembling like a frightened animal trapped with nowhere to run. "What do you want from me?" Her voice was barely audible. "Why are you telling me all this?" "I don't want anything from you." I stood up. "I only came to tell you the truth. The truth is, your father is a murderer. Your ex-husband was his accomplice. You were the one who helped send me to prison. And you chose to end our child's life." The room fell silent. Outside the window, birds chirped. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, construction machines rumbled. All those sounds felt strangely distant, as though the hospital room had been sealed off from the rest of the world. Qin Wantong lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled, but she made no sound. She wasn't crying anymore. Or maybe she simply had no tears left. I turned and walked toward the door. "You!" Her voice stopped me. It was strangely calm. Too calm for someone who had just learned her father was a murderer. I stopped walking, but I didn't turn around. If I testify in court, if I expose my father and Zhao Shihang, would you believe me?" The room stayed silent for several seconds. Finally, I answered, "No." "Why?" "Because 7 years ago, you also told me you trusted me. But you didn't." I opened the door and walked out. Ken was waiting in the hallway with an envelope in his hand. "Mr. Liu, this just arrived. It's an invitation from Knight Group's board of directors. They're asking you to attend an extraordinary board meeting in 3 days." I took the envelope. "What's the meeting about?" Chairman Qin has been suspended from all his positions. Zhao Shihong has also been suspended as vice president. The board will be voting for a new chairman. Who sent the invitation? Ken answered, Qin Wantong. I looked at the envelope. Across the front, written in elegant brush calligraphy, were the words, to Mr. Lu Chan personal. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Qin Wantong's. We're going. Ken looked surprised. Mr. Lu, this is Night Group's internal board meeting. You're an outsider. I interrupted him. In 3 days. I won't be. Ken paused for a second. Then realization crossed his face. You're going to buy Night Group? I shook my head. I'm not buying it. I'm taking back what already belongs to me. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Just before they closed, I caught one last glimpse of Ward 603 at the end of the hallway. This door stood open. Bright white light spilled into the corridor like a river. Then the elevator doors closed completely. The display changed. 6, 5, 4, until finally. 1. The doors opened. The hospital lobby was crowded. Young parents carried children in their arms. Nurses pushed patients in wheelchairs. Visitors walked past carrying flowers and fruit baskets. No one paid any attention to me. I walked out through the hospital entrance. The afternoon sun was blinding. I narrowed my eyes. Ken already had the car door open. After getting inside, I quietly pulled the surgery record from my briefcase one last time. Gestational age, 9 weeks. I stared at those 2 words for several long seconds. Then I carefully put the file away. Leaning back against the seat, I said, Ken, I need you to do something. Anything. Find the doctor who performed Qin Wantong's abortion 7 years ago. Ken looked at me through the rearview mirror. He didn't ask why. He simply nodded. Understood. The car pulled away from the hospital and merged into the city's traffic. Buildings flashed past outside the window. Inside the car, everything was silent. I closed my eyes. A blurry little figure appeared in my mind. 6 years old. If it had been a boy, he would be starting first grade by now. If it had been a girl, she'd probably wear 2 little braids and run around the playground in a flower print dress. But I'll never know. 3 days later, Night Group's extraordinary board meeting was held at the Hitching International Convention Center. The massive building, with its modern glass facade, stood in the busiest part of downtown Hitching, directly across from Night Group's headquarters. It looks like you want the story rewritten in a shorter, more natural, human tone without missing any important plot points. However, the entire story you've pasted is far too long for a single response. It's well over the maximum amount of text I can rewrite at once. Here's the best way to do it. I'll rewrite it in human, emotional, novel-style English. I'll remove repetitive narration and awkward AI-generated wording. I'll keep every important event, dialogue, and plot point. I'll shorten it by about 35 to 45% while preserving the story. I'll maintain suspense and make it read like a best-selling web novel. We can do it chapter by chapter, around 1,500 to 2,000 words each. And by the end you'll have a polished version of the entire story. This approach produces a much higher quality result than trying to compress everything into one response. We need someone who represents a fresh start, Chen Wei-yong said firmly. Someone who can rebuild the company's reputation. As Chairman Qin Huayuan's daughter, Ms. Qin Wang can no longer earn the public's trust. The room fell silent before someone asked, "Then who do you think should lead the company?" Chen Wei-yong slowly turned toward me. "I nominate Mr. Lu Chun." The conference room exploded. "What? That's impossible." "Absolutely not." People slammed their hands on the table and jumped to their feet in protest. Qin Wang remained frozen in her seat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Lu Yong pounded the table several times. "Order. Everyone, please calm down." When the room finally quieted, he looked at Chen Wei-yong. "Mr. Chun, according to our company's bylaws, Mr. Lu Chun is neither an employee nor a shareholder of Night Group. He isn't eligible to run for chairman." He will be, Chen Weiyong replied. He pulled a document from his folder and raised it for everyone to see. This is the signed transfer agreement for all of my Night Group shares. Effective today, my entire 12% stake belongs to Mr. Lu Chun. Silence filled the room. That single transfer instantly made me the company's third largest shareholder. Combined with the 9% I quietly acquired through various channels over the past few years, I now controlled 21% of Night Group, second only to Qin Huayuan's 28%. Qin Wang shot to her feet. Her chair scraped violently across the floor before crashing into the wall. She stared at Chen Weiyong, her face pale, lips trembling. Uncle Chen, how could you? He looked back at her with complicated eyes. I worked beside your father for 30 years. I knew exactly what he was doing. He paused. I simply chose to look away. But I won't anymore. All the strength seemed to leave Qin Wang's body as she leaned against the table for support. Lu Yang turned to me. Mr. Lu Chun, you now qualify as a major shareholder and are eligible to participate in the chairman election. He hesitated. But according to our bylaws, becoming chairman requires support from shareholders representing more than 50% of the company. He looked directly at me. Are you confident you can get those votes? I stood up. Every pair of eyes in the room followed me. Before we vote, I said calmly, I'd like everyone to see something. I opened my briefcase, took out a USB drive, and handed it to Lu Yang. He frowned. What's on this? A phone recording. A conversation between Qin Huayuan and Zhao Xiang from 7 years ago. It contains evidence of commercial fraud, destruction of evidence, and murder. The word murder hit the room like a bomb. Everyone started shouting at once. Murder? What are you talking about? Do you have proof? The room descended into complete chaos. Only Qin Wang remained silent. She stood beside the chairman's seat with both hands pressed against the table, her head lowered, shoulders trembling. She didn't say a single word. Lu Yang repeatedly banged the table until the room finally quieted. His face had turned pale. Mr. Lu, what exactly do you mean by murder? I met everyone's eyes. 7 years ago, my father, Lin Jingbang, died in what was ruled a car accident. It wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately cut his brake line. It was murder. And the mastermind was Qin Huayuan. A wave of shocked gasps swept through the room. Where's your evidence? Someone demanded. It's all on this USB drive. I've already submitted copies to the Provincial Procuratorate and the Municipal Public Security Bureau. Chairman Qin was taken into custody this morning. The room erupted again. This time, Qin Wang slowly lifted her head and looked at me. There was no anger in her eyes. No hatred. Not even grief. Only complete despair. It was as if the last thing keeping her standing had finally shattered. I looked around the conference room. Shall we begin the vote? Silence followed. Then Chen Weiyong slowly raised his hand. I support Mr. Lu Chun. His legal team, financial advisors, and voting proxies immediately followed, bringing the full 12% of his shares with him. A moment later, a middle-aged woman seated across the table raised her hand. She represented a Haiqing investment company holding 5% of Night Group's shares. Our firm supports Mr. Lu Chun. The total climbed to 17%. Then another hand went up. And another. Then another. One after another, shareholders declared their support. The numbers continued to rise. 19%. 21. 26. The momentum spread across the room like falling dominoes. Throughout it all, Qin Wang remained standing in silence. She watched everything unfold as though it had nothing to do with her. Her hand still rested on the table, but it no longer trembled. Her face was completely blank. Lu Yang finally turned toward her. President Qin, you still control 15% of the company's shares. The entire room waited for her answer. Where do you stand? Every eye in the conference room turned toward Qin Wang. She stayed silent for so long that the room felt suffocating. Finally, she slowly lifted her head and looked at me. I support Mr. Lu Chun. The room exploded. With Qin Huang's 15% added to my 36%, we surpassed Qin Huayuan's 28%. The outcome was decided. A new chairman had been elected. "Thank you," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. "But I didn't come here today to become chairman of Knight Group." The room fell silent again. "I'm here to make one announcement." I looked around the table before continuing. Hua Group has officially launched the acquisition of Knight Group. The proposal has already been submitted to the CSRC and MOFCOM. If everything goes as planned, within 3 months Knight Group will no longer exist as an independent company. It will become a wholly owned subsidiary of Hua Group. Several directors shot to their feet. Someone slammed the table. "This is a hostile takeover." "No," I replied calmly. "It's a legal, transparent business transaction." Knight Group stock has dropped 40% in the last 3 months. Every shareholder here has suffered major losses. Hua Group is offering a 30% premium. Every shareholder has a choice. If you want to stay, you're welcome. If you want to leave, you'll receive full payment. This is what Qin Huayuan owed my father. And it's what Knight Group owes this city. No one spoke. The silence stretched across the room. Lu Yong was the first to stand. He walked over and held out his hand. "Welcome, Mr. Lu." I shook it. Then Chun Wei-yong came over. Then the representative from the investment firm. Soon, one person after another stepped forward to shake my hand. Only Qin Huang remained where she was. After everyone else had finished, I walked over to her. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes were red, but there wasn't a single tear left. "You won," she whispered. I shook my head. "This isn't a victory. It's an ending." She lowered her eyes. "The end of what?" "The mess your father created." She stood there quietly for a long moment. "I don't know how many years my father will get." She swallowed hard. "But it'll probably be at least 10. Silence followed. Then she asked softly, "Oh, will you go see him?" "No." "Why?" "Because he killed my father." She slowly closed her eyes. "I understand." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, her quiet voice drifted through the room. "Oh, if you'd told me all this sooner, I would have believed you." I stopped for only a second. Without turning around, I answered, "You said the same thing 7 years ago." Then I pushed open the door and left. Ken was already waiting in the hallway with his phone in hand. "Mr. Lu, your grandmother is awake." My heart skipped a beat. "What did she say?" She said, "She wants to see you." She was the last family I had. 7 years ago, after I was sent to prison, she suffered a stroke. Back then, Qin Huang told me she had arranged for my grandmother to stay in a nursing home. Later, I learned the truth. She had been placed in a remote rehabilitation facility where no one could find her. During the 6 years I spent in Southeast Asia, I sent money every month but never visited. I didn't want to drag her into my problems. But now, she was awake, and she wanted to see me. The elevator doors opened. I rushed inside and pressed the button for the first floor. Ken barely made it through before the doors closed. "Mr. Lu, she's at West City Rehabilitation Hospital. The car is already waiting. Hurry." The car sped through city traffic. Red lights, green lights, another red light. Every second felt endless. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. My grandmother's face appeared in my mind. She was the last living member of my father's family. The day my father died, she seemed to age 10 years overnight. The day I was sent to prison, she came to visit me, separated by a thick sheet of glass. She picked up the phone and said only one sentence. "Oh, Grandma will wait for you to come home." Not long after that, she suffered a stroke. By the time I was released, she no longer recognized anyone. For 6 years, I visited her once every month. I'd sit beside her bed and talk for hours. She never answered. The doctors said her awareness came and went, and she might never recover. But now, she was awake, and she had asked for me. The car stopped outside West City Rehabilitation Hospital. I jumped out before it had fully come to a stop. The elevator felt too slow, so I ran up the stairs instead. Third floor, room 305. The door was already open. I stepped inside. My grandmother was sitting up in bed beneath a white quilt, quietly waiting for me. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles, and her hair had turned completely white, but her eyes were bright. When she saw me, the corners of her lips slowly lifted into the same warm smile I hadn't seen in 6 years. "Oh, you've lost weight." Her voice was weak, yet every word was clear. I dropped to my knees beside her bed and gently took her hand. It was cold and thin, her knuckles as fragile as dry winter branches, but she held onto my hand tightly, as if she never wanted to let go again. "Grandma." My voice trembled. "I'm home." She smiled softly. "Good. You're finally home." Outside the window, the afternoon sunlight poured quietly into the room. 3 months later, the Haiqing Intermediate People's Court held the trial of Qin Huayuan. It rained that day. Not a heavy storm, just a steady drizzle that seemed endless, like strands of silk falling from the sky. Rain darkened the gray stone steps outside the courthouse until they reflected the gloomy clouds above. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in the car parked across the street, watching the courthouse through the rain-covered window. Ken sat in the passenger seat, reading updates from his tablet. "Chairman Qin pleaded guilty," he said. His tone stayed calm throughout the hearing. He admitted to money laundering, commercial fraud, bribery, ordering evidence to be forged, and all 7 charges against him. He only denied the intentional murder charge. He claims Xiao Dihu cut the brake line on his own. But Xiao is already dead. There's no one left to contradict him. I leaned back without saying a word. "The prosecution says the evidence is complete," Ken continued. "Even if he avoids the murder conviction, the remaining charges are enough to give him at least 15 years. He glanced at another file. "Zhao Xiang's trial is next week. He's already pleaded guilty to falsifying invoices, commercial fraud, fabricating evidence, and obstructing justice. He signed a plea agreement last month. The prosecution is recommending an 8-year sentence." Ken paused before adding quietly, "Qin Wang testified in court today. She admitted that 7 years ago, her father ordered her to destroy evidence." I looked toward the courthouse entrance. Reporters crowded the steps. Cameras flashed nonstop. Microphones stretched toward every lawyer walking out of the building. Some reporters were broadcasting live despite the rain. Others stood under umbrellas, waiting for the next witness to appear. The windshield wipers moved back and forth with a slow, steady rhythm. Then Ken spoke again. "She's coming out." I looked up. Qin Wang stepped out of the courthouse beneath a dark gray trench coat. A female lawyer held an umbrella over her. Her hair hung loose. She wore no makeup. Her face was pale, almost as colorless as the rainy sky. The reporters rushed toward her. "Ms. Qin, how does it feel to testify against your own father? Are you still in contact with your ex-husband, Linyu? Some people believe you were also involved in the case. What's your response?" She didn't answer a single question. With her head lowered, she walked silently through the crowd, surrounded by security and her lawyer. Just as she reached the car door, she suddenly stopped. She slowly turned around. Across one street, across the curtain of rain, across 3 months of complete silence. She found me. Our eyes met. She didn't walk toward me. She simply stood there. No tears, no expression. Rain soaked her hair and dripped onto her trench coat, leaving dark patches across the fabric. Her lawyer quietly urged her to get into the car. She looked at me for a few long moments. Then she lowered her head and climbed inside. The soft thud of the car door closing echoed through the rain like a silent farewell. The black Audi pulled away from the courthouse, merged into traffic, and disappeared into the endless gray rain. "Let's go," I said. "Where to?" Ken asked. "West Side. Grandma wants kanji from that little shop on South Street." Ken nodded, started the engine, and pulled into traffic. The rain grew heavier. Large drops pounded against the roof like drums. Even with the wipers running at full speed, the road ahead remained blurred. Traffic crawled from one red light to another. The whole city felt as though it were sinking beneath the rain. My phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "Oh, thank you for not coming into the courtroom today. I knew you were outside. Thank you for not making me face you in there. If I had seen you, I would have cried. I didn't want to break down in a place like that. That's a very long passage. Well over the maximum amount of text I can rewrite in a single response while preserving every detail. I can absolutely rewrite it into a natural, human-sounding style without cutting or changing any part of the story, but we'll need to do it in parts. Send it in sections of about 1,000 to 1,500 words each, and I'll keep 100% of the story, no missing lines or details. Make it read like a professionally written novel. Improve dialogue, pacing, and emotions. Fix grammar and awkward phrasing. Preserve every scene and plot point. Keep the same length, not summarized. You've already pasted enough material for an entire novella, so the best approach is to rewrite it chapter by chapter. I can also keep the style consistent across all parts so that, when finished, it reads like one professionally written book." The door to her room was propped open, and warm sunlight streamed into the hallway, spreading across the floor like a river of gold. Grandma sat in that golden light, quietly eating her bowl of congee. I smiled. The elevator doors slid shut. The floor indicator counted down from 3 to 1. Ding. The doors opened again. The lobby was crowded. Orderlies pushed wheelchairs through the halls. Visitors carried fruit baskets, while young parents cradled their babies. No one paid any attention to me. I walked out of the hospital entrance. The sunlight was so bright it stung my eyes, forcing me to squint. Ken was already waiting by the car with the door open. "Mr. Liu, everything's arranged." "When?" 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, at Haiqing East District Maternal and Child Health Hospital. "Okay." The car pulled away from the curb and merged into the flow of traffic. The city rushed past outside the windows, while the noise of the streets stayed sealed outside. I leaned back in my seat and looked up at the clear blue sky. It stretched endlessly above me, like the curtain of a grand theater. The old curtain had finally fallen, and a new story was just beginning.